All right, so today we're launching into a really extensive exploration of a figure who I think sits perfectly at this intersection of a few different worlds.
Absolutely. You've got material science,
Yeah,
you've got military necessity, and then, of course, global luxury.
exactly. We are exploring the life and innovations of Thomas Burberry, the founder of the global fashion house we all know today.
And it's really an investigation into how utility can create, this enduring style. When people think of Burberry now, they might think of the check pattern, or maybe a trench coat from an old movie.
Sure.
But Thomas Burberry, born back in 1835, he wasn't really driven by fashion at the start. He was driven by a much more practical, immediate problem.
Which was what, exactly?
How do you keep people protected, warm, and dry in that notoriously fickle British weather,
Right.
but without weighing them down, without sacrificing comfort or mobility?
So our goal in this conversation is to really analyze the documents that detail his journey. We're going from, a humble draper's apprentice?
All the way to the creator of Gabardine and the trench coat.
And we want to understand precisely how that relentless focus on the performance of the material created one of Britain's largest branded clothing businesses. We want to give you a quick but really complete understanding of his genius.
His engineering genius, really,
Yeah.
and its impact, which has lasted for centuries.
Okay, so to really appreciate the scale of what Thomas Burberry built, we have to go right back to the beginning. We need to locate his origin story.
Right. He was born in Brockham Green in Surrey, got his education at the local village school. But the crucial part, the thing that sets him on his path, is his apprenticeship.
He was apprenticed to a local draper.
Exactly. And you can think of that as his masterclass in textiles. It gave him this immediate hands-on understanding of thread counts, of weaves, and maybe most importantly, of the limitations of the fabrics people were using every day.
So that foundation gave him a real edge.
A huge edge. He knew exactly what wasn't working. And then, in 1856, he makes his first big move. He opens his own outfitting business.
And this is in Basingstoke. We have to kind of visualize what Basingstoke was like at that moment, right?
Yeah, the research shows it was a small market town, genuinely grassroots. The population was only about, 4,500 people?
So this is not some high-fashion launch in the heart of London. This is a deeply provincial start, which I think frames his early focus perfectly. He's serving local, practical needs.
Precisely.
Yeah.
His first designs were inspired by the clothes of commoners, just hard-wearing, everyday stuff.
Sturdy clothes.
But the climate just demanded something better. The traditional materials that working people use, like heavy wools, they were just so cumbersome. They'd get soaked and just hold that moisture, chilling the person wearing them.
And that realization is what prompts his big strategic pivot.
It is. He moves away from just general clothing and starts experimenting, specifically with materials and clothes designed for rugged outdoor activities.
We're talking about hunting, fishing, riding.
All those activities associated with the growing middle and upper classes who are spending a lot more time outdoors. So this shift is all about performance and functionality, not just basic utility.
That shift is everything, isn't it? He saw a huge gap in the market.
A massive one. The options people had were terrible. You had heavy wools that just soaked up water, or you had these treated canvases that were coated with rubber or oil.
The early waterproofs.
The forerunners, yeah. And they were waterproof, sure, but they were also incredibly heavy. They were stiff, and they couldn't breathe at all,
So they kept the rain out, but they basically turned the coat into a personal sauna.
leaving you soaked from your own sweat. So Burberry's vision was really about solving that breathability problem while keeping the water resistance.
Which meant it was an engineering challenge, not just a tailoring one.
It was. And the sources show he partnered directly with British cotton manufacturers from very early on. This wasn't just him buying fabric off the shelf. He was collaborating with them to create something new.
And his aim was laser-focused.
Completely. Provide weatherproof textiles that were light and comfortable.
And it wasn't just the upper crust he was targeting. He was very strategic, aiming for that growing middle class.
The people who were getting into these countryside hobbies and who had the money to pay for better gear.
And it paid off. It paid off very quickly. We could see clear evidence of this in the census data.
Right. By 1871, so just 15 years into the business, he's already a huge employer in the area. Over 70 people working for him in Basingstoke.
I mean, in a town of 4,500 people, employing 70 makes your business an economic anchor for the whole community. But he wasn't happy with just being a local retailer.
Not at all. The next step was scaling up, and in a big way. By 1878, he'd founded a much larger factory. This one was dedicated to wholesale manufacturing and ready-to-wear clothing.
That move shows his foresight as an industrialist. Bespoke tailoring couldn't serve that growing market. He needed standardization and volume.
And the rate of that scaling is just stunning. By 1881, that factory employed over 200 workers.
So he basically tripled his staff in 10 years.
To manage that kind of growth, all centered on this innovative outdoor wear, you needed to be a very astute manager. You needed efficient production. And you needed a product that people genuinely wanted.
So this industrial foundation, this move from being a draper to a factory owner, that's what set the stage for his biggest innovation.
It's what prepared the company to capitalize on it. The groundwork was laid. He had the infrastructure, he had the staff, he had the vision. The only thing missing
Was the material itself.
and that missing piece arrives in 1879. The sources describe it as the revolutionary discovery of gabardine.
And this wasn't just a new style of coat, it was a textile engineering breakthrough that changed everything for weatherproof clothing.
Revolutionary isn't hyperbole here, not when you understand the mechanics of it. Gabardine solved that twin problem of the old waterproofs being heavy and not being able to breathe.
And the genius was in how it was made, right, not in what was put on it.
Exactly. It wasn't about coating the fabric after it was woven. The innovation was in the construction and the treatment of the yarn itself.
So tell us a bit more about the technical side of the fabric. What made it so water resistant?
The construction is the key. Gabardine is a very high-density, tightly woven fabric. It's got this prominent diagonal rib, a twill weave. The threads are packed together so much tighter than in standard cloth.
So it's creating a physical barrier just from the weave itself.
A physical barrier. And to get even more specific, the warp threads, the ones running lengthwise, are double the density of the weft threads. This creates a very steep diagonal line. And because the fibers are so compressed, moisture just struggles to get through.
So it's not a chemical shell, it's a structural one.
Precisely. And the raw material he used was vital. He used Egyptian cotton.
And why was that so important?
Well, the sources note how specialized this sourcing was. Egyptian cotton is famous for its extra long staples. That means the individual fibers are much longer than in standard cotton.
Okay.
So when you spin those long fibers into yarn, you get a much finer, stronger, and smoother thread. And that allows for that incredibly dense, tight weave that repels water naturally.
And that also explains the durability, I imagine.
It does. The whole process was so innovative that he patented it in 1888. He protected the method, which likely involved treating the yarn with a water repellent agent before it was even woven.
So that's how it stayed breathable. The treatment was on the individual fibers, not sealing the whole surface.
Exactly. And the material got serious attention right away. It attracted really positive reviews. It was even featured at the International Health Exhibition in South Kensington.
Being shown there, that's significant. That's framing it not just as fashion, but as a genuine improvement for public health and well-being.
And that validation stuck around. We see it years later in trade journals. In 1904, Menswear magazine was still talking about it.
What were they saying?
They described it as being resistant to hot and cold winds, to rain, and interestingly, to thorns.
Thorns. That detail really grounds it, doesn't it? This wasn't a coat for a quick walk in the city. This was proper field gear.
It implies a level of tear resistance that was far superior to the old waxed coats. It confirmed its identity as the ideal weatherproof material,
So the success of Gabardine really gives him the leverage for his next big move.
which was to go from being a successful provincial outfitter to a national luxury brand.
It was a very calculated move.
It was. He sent his son, Arthur, to London with specific orders to seek out wealthy clients at the Jermyn Street Hotel.
So they were intentionally putting this high-performance product right in front of the elite. It's a strategy of translating proven performance into prestige.
And that campaign was a huge success. It directly led to them opening their flagship store at 30 Haymarket. By 1891, that was their main wholesale store, featuring pieces like the walking Burberry.
Establishing them right in the heart of British commerce and high society.
But a physical shop only gets you so far.
Yeah.
Burberry was a master of early promotion. He understood the power of, visible proof.
And he did this by making sure two of the most respected public figures of the time were seen in his coats.
Lord Kitchener and Lord Baden-Powell.
That's genius marketing. Lord Kitchener, the famous military commander, and Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the Scout movement.
Both figures are deeply associated with duty, leadership, the outdoors.
So their endorsement wasn't about style. It was an affirmation of function.
Exactly. When these men, whose lives and professions depended on reliability, chose Burberry, it wasn't a luxury choice. It was a choice based on trust.
And that strategic use of key figures just propelled the company towards becoming a national giant. So once gabardine proves its worth in the British countryside, it transcends being just a status symbol. It becomes something much more profound.
It becomes survival gear.
And this is where we see the material's true test. On the harshest edges of the world, worn by explorers.
The significance of this period is just, you can't overstate it. I mean, if a gentleman in London is comfortable in his coat, that's good for business. But if an explorer depends on that same coat to stay alive in the Arctic, that is an entirely different level of validation. Gabardine had to prevent hypothermia, it had to repel ice and wind, and endure constant friction for months on end.
It really proves that the material science came first. The explorers were drawn to its toughness and its water resistance, not its prestige on German Strait.
And if we look at the early adopters, the Norwegian polar explorer, Fridtjof Nansen, he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he was the first documented explorer to use gabardine.
And this was in 1893 on his trip to the Arctic Circle.
A brutal proving ground. Nansen needed protection against that constant freeze-thaw cycle. Older materials, like untreated wool, would get wet, freeze solid, and become totally useless. Rubberized garments would just crack in that cold.
So gabardine offered this perfect compromise.
It did. It allowed for internal moisture management. You know, when you're working hard, you sweat. It let that moisture out, preventing the clamminess that leads to rapid chilling when you stop.
That's literally the difference between life and death in polar conditions.
It is. And the word spread fast in that small community of adventurers. Sir Ernest Shackleton, who is maybe the most iconic British explorer of that era, he adopted Burberry gabardine for 3 different expeditions.
3. That is a profound vote of confidence.
Think about the Endurance expedition. It's famous for being a catastrophic failure that turned into this miraculous story of survival.
They were stranded for months on ice floes in one of the most hostile places on Earth.
And the clothes they wore had to function under unimaginable continuous stress.
You just have to visualize it. If that coat tears on a piece of ice, if it fails to shed water in the freezing Weddell Sea, the consequences are fatal. The gabardine was giving them protection from wind chill and a resilience that other materials just didn't have.
We should probably pause here and talk about this high-profile usage. It's amazing that Shackleton used it, but if we look at how these early expeditions were funded, we know they needed a lot of capital.
Right.
So does the research suggest how much of this was a purely organic choice versus an early form of, say, commercial sponsorship?
That's a critical question for understanding the history of branding. And while we don't have, modern endorsement contracts to look at, the relationship was definitely synergistic. Burberry would provide the best gear available for free or at a big discount.
And in exchange, they could use the explorer's name and the story of the gear's success.
Exactly. For the explorers, it was a necessity. They couldn't risk their lives on inferior clothing. For Burberry, it was the ultimate field test.
So regardless of whether money changed hands, the material had to work. If Shackleton had come back and said the coats failed, that would have been devastating for the brand.
The fact that he came back, praised the equipment, and used it on his next trips confirms the product was superior, whatever the deal was. The function was survival.
And that association of the Burberry label with these feats of endurance, it cemented the brand's identity. Not in fashion trends, but in researched, patented, life-saving equipment.
That reputation, built with the explorers, was the perfect preamble for its next and maybe its most famous deployment. And that deployment takes us from the poles to the trenches and to the single garment that defined the brand globally, the trench coat.
Its beginning was purely utilitarian. It came from a direct military commission.
In 1900, the British War Office went to Burberry with a very specific and urgent request.
They needed a replacement for the military's heavy greatcoats. These were the traditional long, thick wool coats. They were warm, but they became monstrously heavy when they got wet or caked in mud.
Which was a constant state in the trenches of World War I.
They hampered mobility. They offered very little versatility. The Army needed something better.
So this commission leads to the creation of the coat we all recognize today. It had to be lighter, better performing, and designed for the specific logistical nightmare of trench warfare.
And the design that resulted, engineered from gabardine, was revolutionary for a soldier's kit. And the features. They aren't aesthetic choices. Every single one is a functional response to the battlefield. We should probably dissect it piece by piece.
Let's do it. Let's start with the base layer, the lightweight gabardine itself. The weight reduction alone must have been a huge advantage.
Massive. Imagine trying to move through knee-deep mud wearing a soaked wool coat. The difference would have been immediate.
Okay, what about the other features, like the flap of fabric on the back?
The deep back yoke. Its function was explicit. Better rain runoff. By adding an extra layer and directing water away from the main seam at the shoulders, a common weak point, it kept the soldier's upper body dry.
A critical improvement. And the tabs on the shoulders, the epaulets.
In a civilian coat, they might be for decoration. Here, they were part of the loadout system. They secured rank insignia, sure, but more practically, soldiers could clip gear to them. Gas mask bags, gloves. It kept vital equipment secure and out of the mud.
And the straps on the cuffs.
The buckled cuff straps, a defensive feature. When conditions got bad, you could cinch those cuffs tight to stop wind, rain, and mud from going up your arm while you were crawling or moving around.
It's a vital sealing point. What about the extra flap on one of the shoulders, the gun flap?
Right, or the storm flap.
Yeah.
This added extra padding and material density. It might have originally been to cushion the shoulder from a rifle butt, but it also provided a double layer of protection from rain running off your gear. Just built-in wear resistance.
And the pockets.
Storm pockets.
Yeah.
Deep, with button closures. This ensured that essential items, maps, ammunition stayed completely dry.
And finally, those iconic metal rings on the belt.
The D-ring belt clasps. Maybe the most practical addition of all. They allowed a soldier to hang grenades, field dressings, a canteen, whatever they needed, directly from the belt, keeping it off the ground and ready for immediate access.
This whole list just demonstrates that the trench coat was a really sophisticated piece of wartime engineering.
It became a staple for soldiers in World War I because it gave them mobility, protection, and utility that the old greatcoats just couldn't match.
And then after the war, this military utility transitions into civilian life.
Successfully, yeah. The coat had proven itself in the most demanding context possible. People figured if it works in the trenches, it'll definitely work for a rainy commute in London.
And it became stylish because of those functional elements. The yoke, the epaulets, the D-rings, they translated into these sophisticated design details. Utility became a kind of elegance.
And its cultural fame was cemented in the cinema. That guaranteed its status as a permanent icon.
Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca. The trench coat just became shorthand for mystery, gravitas, a kind of quiet heroism.
It conveyed that resilience, that world weariness. But then, years later, you see Audrey Hepburn wearing one in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
And there, it completely sheds the ruggedness and becomes a symbol of chic, classic, effortless style.
The exact same garment. It can embody a hardened detective and a glamorous socialite. The fact that a single coat, engineered for the mud of the trenches, could do that, it just speaks volumes about the timelessness of pure functional design.
So, after clothing explorers, soldiers, and eventually Hollywood icons, Thomas Burberry steps away from the day-to-day running of the business.
He retires in 1917, moves to Abbott's Court near Weymouth, in Dorset.
And his later life was really dedicated to these philosophical themes that, when you look back, you can see they influenced his career from the very beginning.
His religious and humanitarian beliefs, specifically centered on healthy living. And that connection between his personal principles and his professional work is fascinating.
Yeah, the sources detail his very strict personal habits. He was a lifelong teetotaler.
Meaning he never drank alcohol.
And he actively campaigned against smoking. He was also a devout Baptist who held prayer meetings every single morning.
And that strict, principled way of life gives you context for his business philosophy. He wasn't just chasing profit. He was trying to improve the quality of life, the physical condition of his customers.
He designed clothes for sportsmen and soldiers, people who depended on their physical health.
So you can draw a compelling line between his moral beliefs and the material science, can't you?
Yeah, so.
Well, did he see those old, suffocating rubberized cloaks as not just impractical, but maybe morally inadequate because they hindered healthy breathing and exercise?
So by inventing Gabardine, this light, breathable, protective fabric, he was, in a way, aligning his business with his vision for healthy living.
It makes complete sense. His whole career was dedicated to quality and protection, which reflects his own disciplined life. He wanted to create garments that supported the body, not hindered it.
And he lived long enough to see his company completely transform.
He did. He saw it go from that tiny shop in Basingstoke to a local factory to becoming a publicly listed company in 1920.
That public offering is the ultimate validation of his original idea, isn't it? That textile innovation, driven by real utility and produced at scale, could thrive on the global market.
He died peacefully at his home back near Basingstoke in 1926. He was 90 years old. A remarkable age, especially for someone who spent his later years so focused on health.
And he left behind a substantial family legacy, too. He married twice, had 6 children from his first marriage.
And the recognition of his story continues, which shows its power. It's not just about selling clothes. In 2016, almost a century after he died, they released a short film, The Tale of Thomas Burberry.
Yes, a very high-profile tribute. Directed by an Oscar winner, Asif Kapadia, starring Domhnall Gleeson. The fact that a global luxury brand invested so heavily in telling the story of the inventor.
The man who was focused on the twill weave and the quality of Egyptian cotton.
It shows that the original functional innovation is still the bedrock of their entire identity.
The story they chose to tell was one of invention, exploration, and durability. It confirms that the story of the engineer is just as important as the products themselves.
So we've gone from a small shop in Basingstoke to the frozen Arctic and the muddy trenches of World War I. And what this exploration really shows is that Thomas Burberry's success, it wasn't about luck. It wasn't about fleeting trends.
No, it was rooted in 2 fundamental innovations, Gabardine and the trench coat. These breakthroughs connected extreme functionality survival, military mobility, with a style that has endured. He was providing solutions to real, often critical needs.
And for you, the listener, Thomas Burberry's journey illustrates a really powerful business philosophy. If you can identify a specific acute need, in this case lightweight, durable, waterproof gear, and you commit to solving that need through engineering and material science,
You can create a legacy that is intrinsically valuable, one that lasts for well over a century.
his contribution really went beyond luxury. He provided comfort and genuine protection.
Whether you were an early polar explorer fighting for your life, a soldier in the trenches, or just someone commuting through a damp city, his clothes help people endure their environments. And that's why the brand became synonymous with quality and utility.
And as we think about the trench coat, a design born from a specific military need to improve a soldier's mobility and protection, which then became a global fashion staple. It raises a compelling question.
What does that continuous adoption of highly functional military design by civilian fashion, the trench coat, aviator sunglasses, bomber jackets, what does it tell us about what makes clothing timeless?
Are the most enduring designs the ones that prioritize absolute function and necessity above everything else? Does that prove that performance really is the ultimate form of elegance?
A profound thought. Thank you for joining us as we explored the fabric of innovation woven by Thomas Burberry.
Thanks for listening.